And McGilchrist makes this wonderful point, which at first really pissed me off. Usually, when there's a radical new idea, it pisses me off because it takes me out of my comfort. He says, how we pay attention is a moral act. And I think how we pay attention is a choice like that determines the nature of the world we live in.
Going Inside is a podcast on a mission to help people heal from trauma and reconnect with their authentic self. Join me, trauma therapist John Clarke, for guest interviews, real-life therapy sessions, and soothing guided meditation. Whether you're navigating your own trauma, helping others heal from trauma, or simply yearning for a deeper understanding of yourself, Going Inside is your companion on the path to healing and self-discovery. Download free guided meditations and apply to work with me one-on-one at johnclarketherapy.com. Thanks for being here. Let's dive in. Bob Falconer is the author of The Others Within Us, is a pioneering IFS therapist and global educator, drawing on 5 decades of clinical expertise in helping others heal. Bob, you're a fan favorite of this show, and welcome back.
Great to be back.
We were chatting a little bit before the show about the many projects you have swirling around your world. It seems you're as busy as ever. So I'm wondering,
Whenever at the age of 77.
one time when I was finishing college, they had a speaker come. His name was Donald Miller. He's an author and now like a marketing guy, but he gave this keynote speech on how people should aim to peak when they're like 65, 70 years old. So if that's the case, then you're nailing it.
Yeah, Confucius said humans don't reach their full potential until they're 70.
That gives me some relief. That's why I'm just edging into my work. I don't want to be too successful too soon. So we're going to talk about a few things. One is a workshop that when this goes out, we'll have started a couple days ago on spirit, trauma, and healing. And then the other is yet another book you have coming out called Spirit Speaks. Yeah, maybe just catch us up on what you're up to with these projects.
I have a book coming out in 3 days called Opening the Inner World about Swedenborg and IFS with a couple other people, Swedenborg experts. And then I will have this other book called Spirit Speaks, which is a summary of over 3,000 pages of written dialogues I've done with spirit over maybe 10 years now. And I think this will blow away the last tatters of respectability that might cling to me.
A secondary objective of yours.
I'll be officially weird when it
comes out. Yeah.
Uh,
Certificate in the mail.
yeah, I'm proud of it too. I'm kidding, but I've always identified as being part of the counterculture. And I still feel that way and run it.
Yeah.
I don't really want to be respectable. Yeah. So there's those things. And then this project at the workshop, which will already have started by the time this comes out, the first day of it will be over, is on spirit, trauma, and healing. And that I think will be my next major book on the scale of the others within us. I've been researching this and focusing on this for a long time. And I'm struggling to rake all these ideas together in one place so they're usable. And basically, the idea is we don't heal from major trauma without some form of spiritual connection. And that's exiled from polite discourse. It's funny. You can talk about any sexual thing you want. Oh, that's totally wrong. But you start talking about spirit and they go, oh, no, they hear. Oh, how we can help people access this materialistic society has done everything it can to exile and denigrate these kind of experiences, label, pathologize, and label them as mental illness.
It makes me think about what are the bounds of being a therapist. And some things that I was thinking about last week and talking to a therapist friend about is see therapists who are making Instagram videos about politics or doing groups that are like political groups and taking very clear political stances. And I wonder about that in terms of a therapist's ability to then work with anyone of different values. Therapy is not supposed to be values driven, and yet some therapists are stepping out and saying, "Here's where I stand politically." There's also therapists that post a video of them and their partner having brunch on a Saturday, and there's this kind of unveiling of sorts, and this makes me feel old, but even younger generations like Gen Z therapists that are more open with their personal lives and stuff like that. And it's interesting for me because I was trained so psychodynamically, and this kind of iteration of the therapist being a blank slate, but really playing it more conservatively in terms of our transference until it plays out, and then being able to use that, really being able to invite any type of transference that needs to come out. Whereas in this case, some of these more like personal expressions from therapists seems to probably sway that. But depending on how you work and the frameworks you're using, maybe that's not a problem. Who am I to say? Oh, let's talk about spirituality as a big no. That was the point I was trying to make.
This episode is brought to you by Jane, a practice management software and EMR designed to help practitioners run their business, not the other way around. Managing a practice can mean juggling more tools than you ever planned to. One for booking, one for documentation, another for billing. Each solves a small part of the puzzle, but because they don't work together, the manual admin adds up. Jane helps practitioners connect their core tools all in one place. Payments are taken and recorded directly in Jane, so billing stays accurate and easier to track. Jane Websites helps new clients find your clinic online. And if something needs attention, Jane's support team is available by phone, email, chat, with an understanding of how your entire system works together. For added peace of mind, Jane includes privacy and security features like two-step verification, role-based access levels, and HIPAA compliance so that you can feel confident in your practice and knowing that your client data is protected. Practitioners know better than anyone, a little connection goes a long way. To learn more about how Jane can support you, your clients, and your business, head to jane.app/demo. And if you're ready to give it a try, you can use my code JOHN, that's JOHN, for a 1 month grace period on your new account. Again, that's jane.app/demo. Use the code JOHN for a 1 month grace period on your new account.
Yeah, it is a problem. I think you're right. But usually I have a very minority view. I think allowing politics to get into the therapy room is a big mistake. And in the supervision groups, I do not allow political discussion. And I get a fair amount of resentment and pushback on that. The atmosphere has become it's all hate, fear, and self righteousness. If you get down in either side of the divide, from both sides, everybody's guilty. I don't want to be in a world of hate, fear, and self righteousness. Martin Luther King said a long time ago, hatred is never healed by hatred, only healed by love. And when I start saying things like that, people on both sides hate me. Yeah. Oops. Man, So, and the IFS Institute itself has really positioned itself as on the Democrat side or left side, sure you want to call it. And I think that's a big mistake because early on, a lot of the people who were very interested in IFS were evangelical Christians. And boy, could IFS be a wonderful thing for the evangelicals.
We just had you and your co-authors of the Swedenborg book on, and that was interesting too, to see a world that Swedenborg came from in being basically, would you say, a Christian philosopher of sorts, or
I wouldn't call him a philosopher.
what was he?
Mystic. He went into his inner world and he saw things and had these profound experiences and then just wrote like a descriptive geography because he was a scientist. He didn't create cognitive scaffolding and he didn't create all these you shoulds. He just described the depths of his inner world. And
Yeah.
he was able to explore his inner world in incredible depth. And he used the language of his time, which was highly Christian. But still, I know some people call him a philosopher, and that's sort of We start talking words like visionary and everybody cringes and runs for the X's. What's another word?
It's interesting. A lot of what he talked about was his exploration of his inner world through the lens of what we would call hearts and spirit guides. And to your point, framing a lot of that through Christian language and the language that he had and knew at that time. But really a willingness to go inside and see what's there, which is a big piece of your work, right?
Dude, I think this is an exaggeration, but I think real curiosity is a panacea in the inner world.
Yeah.
A panacea. It cures just about everything. But there's two kinds of curiosity. There's Sherlock Holmes, let's nail this thing down,
Yeah.
curiosity. And there's wide open, heart centered curiosity. And at the start of any inquiry, they look the same. As you go down them, that Sherlock Holmes kind of attitude, it gets really narrow and really focused and really laser like and very precise. And much of the world disappears. And when that kind of curiosity is satisfied or complete, the issue is over, dead, done, solved, QED, done. But the heart centered curiosity, as you start going down that path, instead of narrowing down, the focus widens and wider and becomes 360 degrees. And instead of moving towards certainty in an answer, it moves towards wonder and awe. And then as you move even further, it moves toward love and ecstasy and euphoria and communion. Now, I think obviously, in terms of other people and ourselves, we want that other kind of curiosity. Now, Ian McGilchrist discusses this in terms of right brain and left brain. And I think that the example he gives, which I think is very revealing, he says, Imagine that you're a bird standing on some gravel, pecking for seeds in the gravel. You have your Sherlock curiosity
Yeah.
focused on the gravel, picking out the seeds. Your heart centered curiosity is scanning the entire rest of the universe. And it is primarily interested in surprise, the new, the anomalous, what doesn't fit. And two of its major focuses are potential mates and predators. And McGilchrist makes this wonderful point, which at first really pissed me off. Usually, when there's a radical new idea, it pisses me off at
Yeah.
first
Yeah.
because it takes me out of my comfort.
Yeah.
He says, How we pay attention is a moral act. And I think how we pay attention is a choice like that determines the nature of the world we live in to a large extent. So if we can live in this right brain, heart centered curiosity, I think it solves an incredible number of problems. And if we can bring that attitude, that moral choice, to use McGilchrist's word, to our inner work and to other people, including the ones you hate politically, our lives will go much, much, much better.
My sense is if we could do more of that, it would literally save the world.
And Chris says one other thing. He says the real way to change, because he is very distressed about the world. He says, what will change is a change in consciousness. And he said, I don't know where he got this number, but he says, if 3% of the people on the planet can change their consciousness, that's probably enough to tip the balance. So that makes me very optimistic. If I and you and others like us keep helping people heal and get more and more deep inner awareness and more come from the heart centered curiosity, that could be what changes the whole planet. Instead of going out and screaming hatred, fear, shame, nastiness.
The more I do this show and talk to people like you, I come back to the central question of what is trauma and how do we heal from it? What does real healing look like? And a lot of therapy and tending comes from a place of figuring stuff out or insight, not the IFS insight of going inside, but insight of if I can just figure out why I am this way, I'll be able to heal from it. And what I tell my clients, and I work with very smart people, I've been here in Silicon Valley my whole career, right? And people with MBAs and Ivy League degrees and all this stuff is if it was a matter of just outsmarting your trauma, you would have done it by now. You don't need my help with that. right? You can draw the dot between my mom was horrible to me, and now I seek out partners that are horrible to me, even though another part of me knows better. It's great. You got that. Now what?
Yeah, don't
You still have to heal. So to me, like IFS is relational. It's a way of relating to these parts of you that hold the pain, parts of you that protect the pain. And IFS has a texture to it that I would really call love. I think that's essentially what the model is. But even again, as a therapist, there's part of me that's don't say love.
yeah, I really
You're gonna get canned. You're gonna lose your license. Yeah, even that is too mushy or abstract or spiritual or whatever it is. But that's really what it is, and there's a texture of that. There's also a lot of IFS therapists, especially when we're starting out, that have these figuring out parts. If I wonder how many parts are here and what to call them, is this a protector? Is this a UB? Whatever. And in reality, it doesn't really matter if the work is safe, if the quality and the texture of the session is safe, if there's safety in the client system and in the therapist system. That's when really magical things just naturally happen and the healing happens naturally. Oh, and what a relief that the therapist doesn't have to be micromanaging every part of that.
yeah, definitely. I think the word love is key to it all, but we can do that.
Yeah.
You
I'll bleep that part out when I edit this.
know, please, really important. So I use the word respect a lot. And I know it doesn't start with the C, so it's not C's. But I think that's a core value of IFS is we respect the person's system and we respect all the parts, the suicidal part, the drinking part, the obnoxious part. We respect them all. And this connects to what you were saying because Melody used to say often, respect is the minimum of love. I love that phrase. And respect is respectable. You can talk about it. By the way, Tia Melody died last week. One of
I
the
didn't know that.
one of the greatest addictions treatment people ever. And I was lucky to get to work with her a lot.
No kidding.
82.
She has had a lot of impact on the Meadows, which is a treatment facility that's out here, not far from you and I, here near San Jose. And they have locations everywhere, but they have a lot of her stuff built into their
Yeah.
curriculum. They have a lot of Dick's stuff too. But yeah, and even in the realm of nonviolent communication, you see a lot of her stuff. Yeah, massive contributions.
So you ready for some weird stuff? Or do we have
I'm ready for it. This is exactly what I'm wanting.
the others within us was primarily focused on unattached burdens because that's what came up and got right in my face and said, you pay attention to me, Bob. And so I did. And working with unattached burdens implies that our minds are porous. And I think Dick has done a superb job of following out the implications of the idea that mind is multiple. And just that idea that mind is multiple revolutionizes psychotherapy. Many of the old values are turned on their head, and it makes it incredibly more effective. I think this idea that mind is porous is similar to that, and we have not yet explored the implications of really accepting this idea. Little bit, there's legacy burdens, unattached burdens, guides, all that kind of stuff. So there is some recognition to it, but I think a lot more work can be done here.
Hey, if you're a therapist, I want to help you deepen your client work, help them get better results without burning yourself out. You can do all this by learning to harness the power of IFS. So I want to tell you, we've got a free IFS resource library that you can download now. This is full of resources like my quick start guide to IFS, the full IFS protocol, a bunch of demos of me doing IFS with real people, and extra self-care practices for therapists. You can get all this for free in the link in the description, and I hope you enjoy.
And a couple things. First, I think in exploring the porosity of mind, the things that are not part of us or our personal history or even our family legacy, the weird stuff that's deep in the weeds when you start exploring deeply in your mind, because I was coming from a therapist's point of view, I saw the painful stuff first. I didn't see the benevolent stuff very much because people don't come in complaining about it.
That's the therapist bias to begin with. We go in looking for the hurt, looking for the pissed off part, looking for the troublemaker part.
And it's why people come to us. So why not? Of course. In reviewing the anthropological literature, and I do have an undergraduate degree and a little bit of graduate work in anthropology, in talking about spirit possession, which is completely acceptable thing, respectable thing to talk about in anthropology, but not okay in psychotherapy.
Yeah. No.
In reviewing the anthropological data, which is too vast for anybody to really grasp on spirit possession, but I believe the vast majority of these kinds of contacts are positive and sought after. And in many traditions, people do all kinds of stuff to elicit these kinds of contact and to expand and explore the porosity of their mind and the antipodes of their minds, these far territories to go into when we really explore our inner worlds. So I think I'm paying more and more attention to the positive experiences people have. And I realize most DMT containing psychedelics, people report meeting agentic conscious beings, which is a nice way of saying entities or spirits. And in Roland Griffith's studies, 80-90% said these were positive. Yeah. Ayahuasca, which is a DMT containing psychedelic, but also most people meet Mother Ayahuasca or other guide energies. There are, of course, nasty ones around. So I think people get so scared of the inner world, and we tend to ignore the fact that there are all these wonderful resources there. Yeah. So that's the first point I wanted to make about this other world. And the second, and this is, we need spirit to heal. We need this kind of contact. Because if all we're seeing is the nasty stuff, we're still frightened at the depths of our own minds. Hard to enjoy life when you're constantly frightened of yourself. Yep. The other thing I'm trying to, just as Swedenborg did in his way, he created a geography in our world. I'm exploring that idea too. And I think it's a continuum, but there is subject and objective do not divide. It is not a bifurcation like that. I believe it's a continuum, but many traditions have said there are three, not two. And I think a lot of people blame poor old Descartes for a lot of stuff, the Cartesian dualism and all of that. But I think they're right that his dividing the world up into res cogitans, thinking stuff, and res extensa, stuff that takes up space, that's a big problem. There's actually a third realm in between that Luis Eduardo Luna, the ayahuasquero from Brazil, who's my age, 70s, and probably done 700 ayahuasca journeys, called this middle realm the res fantastica, because it's inhabited by the imaginal realm, imagery. But I've discovered that the Sufis had a very similar idea, Barzakh. And they say that we humans are in between beings. We are like an isthmus of land between the divine, the continent of the divine, and the continent of the material things. And we are an isthmus of contact, an in between the interior subjective and external world. And they have many other things they say. And they say, this is actually wonderful. And it's who we are. And Ibn Arabi, who was one of the greatest, a lot of people think the greatest Islamic philosopher, even said, recognizing that our nature is to be a barzakh is the beginning of wisdom. And the West totally denies this fact. So we don't get to even start on the staircase to wisdom. Winnicott had a very similar idea. He said that children learn by playing, and playing is a fusion of imagination, and he used the word illusion, with reality. And he said this kind of play creates an intermediate realm between the person's mind, subjectivity, and objectivity. And he even said all human creativity and culture come from this intermediate realm. And one of his commentators or followers, acolytes, whose name I'm spacing out right now, called this the psychological continent. But they saw this as being foundational for all of human culture. One more, if I'm not going too far, John or Key. He talks about the subjective realm, the objective realm, and he also says there's a realm he calls the transjective. And the example he gives is from that evolutionary psychologist Gibson, affordances. The idea that what we perceive in the world, we don't perceive things. When you see a coffee cup with a handle, what your body perceives is the ability to pick that thing up. It's a good thing to grab, affords us the possibility of grabbing it. And there is some laboratory evidence, like when we see a staircase, we see it gives us the possibility of going up and down. Affordances are neither subjective or objective, they're transjective. They come from the interaction of these other two realms. And you can go even further with this, just like the Sufis say this is key, and Winnicott says this is key. This is where human meaning comes from. This is where we actually live our lives in this realm. And I'm going, what? We live our lives in a realm we've been trained in the West to believe does not exist at all.
Yeah.
Oh my God, how foolish we are.
Being in control of your mind and of your life is like the ultimate goal for most
The
people.
illusion of being.
And this is all antithetical, the illusion of it, right?
Yeah.
The thing is, it's like you can't be in fear and in curiosity at the same time. And sometimes even in a given session, right, we're swaying in between the two. And what the therapist is really trying to do is help access curiosity in their own system and help the client do the same. Because when we do that, the work is safer. And hey, every now and then, healing just tends to happen, right? Trauma is about unsafety and a loss of agency, right? And what you're talking about is having frameworks and words to what has happened to you or what might happen in a session or what might be happening right now helps create safety, right? It's also the same reason why a lot of folks, when they're doing psychedelic work, a way to keep it safe is creating some scaffolding around like what could happen in their experience and then helping them integrate that experience. It can be unsafe when people go in and have really traumatic experiences and their systems get blown out and then they don't have a way to integrate what happened, right? So yeah, so much of it is about, yeah, safety, curiosity, having a way to explain things because humans, we like to explain what happened to us, right? We build a story around what happened to us immediately, right? Or someone that comes into my office and they've had a story around something that happened to them and they're looking to really just get that story confirmed, right? When they come to me. Again, it's like
Yeah.
my mom was mean to me and now I seek out mean partners and that's why I drink. It's great.
They come to me for that. They came to the wrong guy. But I think you're right. I think you are talking about something that's super important. And a lot of people don't like this idea. We live inside of a story, all of us, including the hyper rational alleged scientist. That person has a story about the nature of the world and what's morally right and wrong. And they just want to pretend it's not a story, that it's a story just like anyone else's. And I think of stories as prisons we choose to live inside. Most often, that's how they function. And I think need to get into a story, explore it, and then get out of it, climb on top of that box and see where you can go next.
Yeah.
I think the stories are really pernicious. I think the idea of predictive coding or predictive processing is super important. Your story tells you what's relevant, what has value, what matters in your life. That's a big function of having a story. What is relevant to you on a deep level, what matters, what you value, will determine the world you perceive. It will actually determine the world you live in. And this predictive coding model shows us how that happens, and it all happens preconsciously. You get raw sensory data down here somewhere, and there's lots of it. Less than only maybe a few, 2, 3% of that gets up into your brain. And there seem to be all these gates, and the raw sensory data is coming up, and there are these grids that determine value or relevance or whatever you want to call it that come down. And if the grid says, nah, you're not relevant to my story, you never get to experience that in any way. And some of these models have 6 grids and some have 10. Who knows? I don't know. Who knows? But this means that what we value deeply, not what we say we value, that hardly matters at all. So really what our behaviors determines the world we perceive and the world we live.
Yeah.
So these things are super important.
Yeah. A lot of this comes down to how do we receive information, right? And bring it back to, I bring a lot of this back to the IFS basics around helping a client experience insight and how that's different. If not only you're aware of this critical part that tells you that you suck, but you can become more aware of him. And when you open yourself to him and speak curiously toward him or whatever, and wait and just wait and don't think and just wait, he might talk back to you, right? And let you know more about his story and why he does what he does or whatever. So that's a really weird thing to do. It's really weird to get information that way. Again, when so much of our culture is around, I am this person who has thoughts and I can control thoughts, right? Or from a CBT lens, right? It's like my thoughts are just distorted and I just need to undistort them, untwist them, and I'll feel better, which to an extent is true. Or from a part's perspective, it's like there's a part of you that offers that distortion of you suck, or really, what if you suck, or really, I'm afraid of you sucking because that would mean disconnection, right? And loss of love. So that's what I'm trying to help you do is, oh, that makes sense. So it's like parts hold these core beliefs, parts hold these fears, these wounds. But that's a different way of getting information is like hearing from a part. And then in the realm of a lot of your work, hearing from these other elements in the system, whether it's spirit, a spirit guide, ancestral guide, right? Something that is not native to your system is like the next level of kind of experiencing a different way of getting information, right?
And I think IFS provides totally even necessary groundwork or foundation for this other work. Because in IFS, it becomes super clear that we're made up of parts. These parts are fully formed people. They're not a drive or some two-dimensional thing. And we can and should form relationships with their whole persons. I'm a big fan of Martin Buber. I know Dick is not a big fan of Martin Buber, but this whole issue of personhood and a personal relationship is very important. And these people can hijack you. They can take
Yeah.
you over and I don't do it so much anymore, but used to be if somebody would cut me off on the three-way, there was a tantruming 3-year-old driving my car all of
Oh
a
yeah,
sudden.
I've got one of those.
That's
Yeah.
not good news at 70 miles an hour. It's not good news. But anyway, once you get this way of interacting with other people of the subjective realm mm, as fully formed people and having respectful relationships with them, it's much easier to start relating to spirits or whatever we're going to call them in that way too. And I find this idea of personhood it gets the most pushback and the most contemptuous sneering from people who don't like what I
What is the idea of personhood? What does that mean?
I'll go back to Buber because I think he's the father of this. No, he's not. It goes back thousands of years. He says there's two possible, he calls them words, but they're actually word pairs. I, thou, or I, it. And you can relate to everything either way. He says specifically, you can relate to a stone in an I, thou way. And then he says, if you see the full dimensions and there's respect involved, and he also says, early he seemed to say that all evil comes out of I, it relating. After the Holocaust, I think, I think his opinion of evil changed. Yeah, as it did for many people. But Martin Luther King was a personalist. He thought, and it was the basis, of the entire civil rights work. And he had a great way of saying it. He said, we have to respect everybody because everybody has somebodyness. There's this unique essence of them that will never be repeated and, that requires respect when we recognize that in people. Most of psychology treats our internal parts as it. Freud never used the word ego, superego, or id. He just used the simple German pronouns I, it, and over I. So he thought everything that wasn't your ego, wasn't the I, was an it, was a thing. And he tried to relate to the rest of the mind that way.
Again, it's like, what is compassion? And going back to this piece around a therapist making political posts, and I, to your point, really agree. We shouldn't be doing that. If you can think of someone you really don't like and hold them as a collection of parts that are well-meaning, and for some people, like very intricately designed protective systems that are doing what they believe they should do for survival, then you start to soften toward the person a little bit. And some people have parts that fear that means I'm going to condone someone if I have compassion for them. And I find that really weird. And I don't think that's like at risk. There's a difference between condoning someone or the behavior versus what's the real risk of cultivating compassion in your system toward that person. It's actually like the ultimate hack. It's like the ultimate way to actually find like love in your heart, right? It actually would be a way to be able to work with this person or have a conversation with this person, right? Or talk politics with this person if you're going to do it, right? From even a 1% more self led way, right?
Yeah.
People have their protective systems are so up around people, and then it creates this loss of connection, this further divide. And it's, I think, a crisis that we're right in the thick of right now. And yeah,
And Dick says protectors almost always create what they most fear in the external
that's
world.
right. Yep.
They, I can be pretty snarky. I'm a lot, no, not better on the snark meter than I used to be. But he said to me, Bob, you have X-ray vision for the protectors, but you often don't see the exiles behind them. And that was so painfully true, painfully accurate. I want to give you an example of someone I consider like a Mount Everest of spirit. It was this Tibetan Buddhist monk who'd been captured by the communist Chinese and held literally for 20 years, for much of that time, literally chained to a wall. And when he got free and was out in Dharamsala and was back to health, he was interviewed. And these Western people were interviewing him. And one said, and he said that the monk said, oh, I was in grave danger. I was in grave danger there. And one of the Western reporters, oh, did you think you were going to die? And the monk laughed. He said, no, I was afraid I might lose compassion for the Chinese. Yeah. And I lose
What would that mean if you,
first one agrees with me politically. Oh, my Lord.
yeah, we're all trying. And something, so I actually had one of your buddies on the show, Tim, talking about his work in education. Great episode. I think that should come out today, May 19th. And then this will be out a week from today. And part of his framework is this loss of connection or the threat of loss of connection in the classroom. And like that really is the heart of all of it, right? And the heart of really what our parts are trying to do is help us to create and maintain and preserve and not lose connection. And then yet, to your point, a lot of times we end up doing the very thing that we're trying to prevent. But it really is about that.
Yeah. And when we're doing that stuff, it usually creates isolation, which
Yeah.
is Elkin keeps saying a higher driving force of the universe.
Yeah.
I was thinking, and I'll be talking about them in the conference I'm doing on spirit and healing, but also I'm going to do a book on this. All these people's different definition of what the real core of trauma is. A lot of people, separation was the big theme. You've been saying separation from who you really are, your real self, separation from any contact with the divine, all these other ideas, numbing, which creates a universal separation. One woman said not having anyone to talk to about the trauma afterwards, which is another flavor of separation.
Yeah.
I think this idea of numbing, that trauma creating this numbing is super important. The path work, which is, I don't know, a spiritual or emotional healing I don't even know what to call it, founded by Eva Pierrakos a long time ago. They had a wonderful theory of the origin of evil. And I think it's right. The evil begins in numbing to our own pain. Because once you've numbed to your own pain, in order to maintain that numbing, you have to numb to everybody else's pain. And then to maintain that numbing and numb to everybody else's pain, you have to start poking at them to keep them away from you so that they don't trigger any of your stuff. Once you've started doing that, you're rolling down the hill toward cruelty. And it just every little bit further you go, the meaner and meaner you get. So the origin to evil is numbing to our own pain. And that's what trauma often causes. So I think that's how trauma propagates itself. I've been wondering, there's all this trauma and evil in the world. It seems to be running the show here. How does it propagate? How does it reproduce?
I would love to take a peek into the therapy profession 30 years ago. And part of how I got started on this work is upon finishing graduate school. It wasn't 30 years ago, but the mention of trauma was virtually non-existent. We talked about like crisis intervention, like what to do when someone's activating crisis or there's a mass casualty or something like that. But we had virtually no training on trauma. And so, like many therapists, you get into the field and you're sure comfortable with clients talking about these horrific things that happen to them, but then you don't really know what to do with it all. And unintentionally, you might put them right back in their trauma. And then you go, oh, I'm sorry, your time's up. See you in a week. Good luck surviving for the next week. And they go and are numbing and dissociating and all these things, right? Have explosive fights with everyone on the freeway or every their partner, their friends, whomever, right? I'm also on the getting trained in somatic experiencing, the Peter Levine stuff, and he talks a lot about the trauma vortex and the healing vortex. And he's got these images for it. And it helps me frame up what you're talking about, right? In terms of the trauma vortex and being in that hurt and in that pain and in that numbing and in that cycle. And some people, when they come to my office, they've been in that trauma vortex for a decade or decades or whatever it is, right? And the good news is just spending time in the healing vortex is healing in itself. And I think, again, a lot of that is getting into that compassion, love, a lot of things that IFS can help us access, that just being in that is healing in itself. The work isn't always necessarily about going back there, quote unquote, and reliving every excruciating detail of your actual trauma, the traumatic events, right? You already know what happened, right? It's like your parts were there and have every vivid detail already. But there's also, again, this split among therapists of to what degree do you need to relive all this crap in order to heal, right? So the EMDR folks would say that we got to go back there and we got to hold that memory in mind and start the bilateral stimulation and whatnot. And one thing I love about IFS is we don't necessarily have to go back there. The parts will show us the way. And primarily, it's if the parts need to be witnessed in that painful moment and then brought into the present and brought into the loving leadership of self, that's a much gentler path in my experience. But yeah.
That's a key difference between IFS and the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Catharsis versus witnessing. The rest of the trauma world was catharsis. You have to pump all this stuff,
Get it out.
it's what the part needs.
Yeah.
What does the part need you to know and see so that it doesn't feel left alone with that stuff anymore?
Yep.
The part's in control. And they sound quite similar, but I think in practice they're very different processes.
Yep.
There's something else I want to say about this trauma. I'm old enough so that I can remember when therapists alleged that child sexual abuse almost never happened. There was the major textbook of psychiatry in America in the late 60s and the early 70s said father-daughter incest happens less than 1 in a million times. It's vanishingly rare. And when it does happen, it's often good for the child. That was what was being taught psychiatrists. And the whole movement, the survivors movement, was a grassroots movement with some therapists and more therapists joining, and the therapy schools and the quote experts were all against it and did everything to crush it, which is a dismal fact. And the recognition of trauma, PTSD, that did not come from these fancy institutions that are now claiming to be the big trauma experts. It came from the Vietnam veterans rap groups. They knew PTSD because they all had it. And they were organized by one guy, the psychiatrist, Dr. Robert Lifton, and they went and they didn't go to the schools. The schools were hopeless. They went to Washington, D.C. And then Washington, because you can't say no to a veteran in Washington, the Washington put pressure on the Therapists Association. And that's how PTSD got in the DSM. It's a pretty ugly and distressing story. So we've come a long ways just in my lifetime.
And still have a long way to go. Part of my personal and professional life mission has become like, I would love for healing from trauma to be a no-brainer, something that is completely accessible. And when you walk into a therapist's office or whomever's office, this is a thing that we can help you heal from, and not this mysterious beast of a life sentence, right? Or like having complex PTSD at being a life sentence or whatever. That's what I'm up to here. And I'm excited for this moment in time of the things we're learning, the things we can realize we're not working back then. Even again, like Tim being in the schools and having kids fill out the ACEs scale to start screening for this stuff. Or a kid who can't sit still, okay, he might have ADHD. He also might be highly traumatized. That's a novel idea that's just now arriving in some school systems and public systems. And let's keep going with that and be curious about the bigger picture and the many ripples of trauma. Bob, we got about 5 minutes left. So I know you mentioned you have yet another book coming out called Spirit Speaks. Tell me just a little bit more about what that book's about and what people can expect from it.
Okay. About over 10 years ago now, I was at a workshop assisting Kay Gardner, who I admire. She is wonderful, all you IFS people. I believe she's going to be coming out with a book on legacy burdens. If you ever get a chance to work with her. Anyway, she suggested this exercise, and I thought it was so stupid. I wasn't done it. But because it was Kay, I did it. And the exercise was you just think of something that you really want some guidance on, and you just start a written dialogue. And you put your name and then, hi there, whatever name you want to put in for spirit. And you ask the question. Then you just put the spirit's name and write an answer. And I did this for about 10, 15 minutes. And I was astounded. Answers came out of it that were wiser than what I was aware of. Clearly, something in there knew more than I did, which sort of makes sense from an IFS point of view. So I started doing this every day for 10, 15 years. And then this voice once said, you should publish this. And I went, oh, I'm going to be totally the flake now. But then I've got about over 3,000 pages of this stuff now. And I've summarized it, and that's what the book is going to be about. And it is clearly wiser than my conscious mind. And one thing I love is it has a great sense of humor.
Great. We can't wait to check it out. And again, Bob, you have quite the following. I was in my level 1 training and people were plugging resources or institute approved resources. And then people in the chat were plugging Bob Falconer interviews on Going Inside podcast.
I don't think an institute approved. I might be in on the fringes, though. That's like
Yeah.
rumors that they're talking nicely about.
Yeah. Even despite that, people are plugging your stuff in the chat in my level 1 training. So you're on your own list. It's still very much appreciated by people. And I've had people reach out to me and say, these chats with you are among their favorite episodes of this show. And I think one of the many things you do is you give people permission to be curious. You give people permission to help their clients be curious about what else could be happening here, what else is happening in the system, right? And when we go beyond just like the ordinary parts that we learn to work with, what the magic and the phenomena that can happen in our systems. Yeah. Kudos for giving people that permission and their rebellious, curious parts to see what's beyond.
I want to say one more thing. One thing that gets clearer and clearer to me after 50 years, more than 50 years of studying this stuff diligently. I do my homework. I am a hard worker. The most brilliant, insightful, and wise human beings on this planet are astoundingly ignorant. We know just about nothing. And we are in preschool. The most brilliant ones of us are in preschool. Most of us are wandering around in diapers pretending we understand the universe. It's the poet William Butler Yeats had a beautiful image for this. He said, imagine all human knowledge is one bubble with that beautiful iridescent sheen that moves around a bubble. Yes, it's beautiful, isn't it? Now, that bubble is one of many bubbles in a small patch of sea foam, which is on a little bit of sand in an insignificant cove on the shore of a vast, dark sea.
Epic.
Yeah. And this helps me stay curious.
Awesome. Bob, it's great to have you back, and I'm excited for your new book. We'll make sure to put links to everything that we have in the show notes and description, and of course, links to your website where people can go and see a list of your books, your offerings, your workshops, and stuff like that. Because I know you have an evolving list of offerings and ways that you help people. So we'll be sure to link all that stuff.
Okay, great. Good talking with you again, John. Take care.
Thanks, Bob. See you soon.
Bye bye.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Going Inside. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe wherever you're listening or watching, and share your favorite episode with a friend. You can follow me on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at John Clarke Therapy, and apply to work with me one-on-one at johnclarketherapy.com. See you next time.